watching your work on stage and watching you struggle through an idea and finding it. And the moment where you find it, that to me is the most dynamic thing about anything that people make. So often in music and any art, you only get to see the end result, right? You only get to see the thing that the artist wants you to see. And I think the reason that I admire you so much and have been, you know, so fascinated with you is that you want to do the opposite. You want to show the audience the moment when it happens.
God, yes.
But I'm wondering if you could tell me if you have a particular memory of the first time maybe a piece of music grabbed you and sort of held you in its grasp, you know, when you were young, or if you remember
it was always there.
It was always there.
One of the things that I think defines me is that, you know, I think of myself as a jazz musician. Now, even if I'm doing a orchestrated piece of music, I consider that slow improvisation. And I feel that, like what you've seen in the live shows that, you know, people have seen is, yes, exposing, finding it, because that's exciting to me. But that doesn't have to mean soloing. It's improvisation. And I do feel like that represents one of the best parts of the living spirit, is problem solving. And I love watching people either problem solve, talk about something they're passionate about, or do something they're concentrating on. I can watch anyone do something they're concentrating on, any job in the world, because you just see that thing. I mean, to me, time and space stop. And as a kid, I remember, you know, everybody in the family was more of a classical musician. They tried to get me to, you know, they'd leave music up. And this is what I thought recently. I thought I was sort of cheating because I just liked playing by ear. Felt like I wasn't doing any real work, you know, and I still sometimes have that feeling. But what I've realized as I've grown up is I became self-taught. I had horrible troubles in school. I failed everything.
Really?
Miserably, yes. But the truth of the matter is I was sitting there bored going, I know what I'm going to do with my life. And I talked to the teachers about it. And they go, well, that's good, but you might want to learn some other things. Like,
When did you know what you wanted to do?
As far back as I remember.
Really?
Yeah.
And so by the time you were in school, you knew you wanted to play music all the time?
I was stuck there for the 6 hours every day, and they were absolutely miserable.
And what were you waiting to do? Did you have a basement? Did you have a...
I waited to get home not only to play music, but to do that thing that all learned people are supposed to avoid, which is watch tons of TV. And I especially loved, you know, we didn't have cable then. I had a little rule with myself. If something was black and white, I'd watch it, which is a very funny corollary for this. But what I got was I watched a lot of old movies, and I got the vernacular, and I got this vocabulary. And because my parents were both involved in education, I was often hanging around older people, and erudite people, and people who were interested in things. And you know, my parents could never do the things so many of my friends got, and it breaks my heart for them, is, you know, hey, this music thing's nice and cute, but you better learn to do something. If you have a few extra hours free after that work, you can play. And then they go through a fight after adolescence of, no, I really want to do this. I think I'm supposed to. You know, I moved to.
So you're saying your parents never did that to you?
Well, they couldn't. My dad supported the family being a musician. So, you know, in retrospect, that was never going to come up.
So were you the kid that would put your head down and just, like, the hours would disappear?
Yes. Still.
Still?
Yeah, if I sit at a piano and I get into it, I don't know how long it's going to go. Still. And I'm working. If I notice I'm repeating some pattern and I get bugged because I catch myself, I dig in a little harder.
Who do you consider you're working for when you do a film? Are you working for the characters, for the movie itself, for the director, or for yourself?
Director and the audience. And then I try and please myself in that process. Otherwise, there'd be no qualitative value to it. You
One
know?
one of the things that I often hear being a lament of film composing is when a director attaches temp music to a scene, which is, just for people who don't know,
Yeah,
temp
no.
music is you find some
Inform them of my
existing
nemesis.
music. You find existing music and you put it over the scene to give your composer a sense of the mood you kind of want. And in a way, maybe it's saying like, well, sort of copy this,
Well,
but make
it's
it your own.
crippling because once they do that, the director, editor, and the producer have watched the movie 100 times, and it's like the analogy I've always given is like the old story about, you know, the duckling that's born and sees a dog first and goes mother, and then that's it. You know, I saw a musician who used to play on a lot of John Williams scores talk at Cannes, first year I ever went, which was when Paul's first movie came out. And the guy was just like, yeah, you know, when we as session musicians hear a composer come in and it sounds like some other score we played on a year before, we don't look at him and think he's a thief. We don't look at him and think he's uncreative. We know he was forced to copy that thing because the other people couldn't see anything else. And I've been forced to copy things to the point of tears, where I'm crying in front of people, literally going, we're here. You're going to have a full orchestra. You have me. I'll make as many versions as you want for this cue. You can throw them out time and time again, but we can find something new together. Yeah, but I want that. Well, why don't you buy that piece? Just buy it. No, but I want you to do that. And that's what happens. There was a few films I did in a row that ended up being things that people put in temp music for other movies and TV commercials. And I've never made a stink about it because I knew that composer wasn't willfully trying to either cheat the audience, rip me off, anything else. Like, I just like sit there and go, oh my God, I see some TV commercial, and it's like, okay, that's the Huckabees theme with a couple of notes changed so they wouldn't get sued, and they're really hoping I don't go after them. And look, I'm not going to. I'm sure the composer wanted to do something and did, and they went, yeah, but it's not that. See, that thing goes up there, and then a bell comes in, and this... It's horrible. It's a scourge. But it's unavoidable because people want some music when they're editing a movie.
So is there a conversation that you have in the beginning with the director, or is there any way to sort of head off the temp music at the pass? Or, you know, how do you kind of deal with that when it comes up?
You can just beg them to be open. You work really hard. The only ways I've figured it out is when I can give people music early. In other words, the best thing is when people have music before they start editing, because they make their intuitional decisions, their subconscious problem-solving decisions. They're happy to move film to music when it's them. But ego is such, once they've hired, let's say, you to do music, and you say, you know what, the scene will be great. The audience's biorhythm is going to feel amazing if this rhythm just stays insistent. All you need to do is add a couple of frames to this scene, and the music will feel natural. Well, I mean, you'd just be looked at as a crazy person. And I can tell you this for a fact.
So with the show you do at Largo, what should it be when it's at its best? Like, your most idealized version of that show, what should it be?
Somebody feels like they're seeing something they couldn't get anywhere else. I made this decision. Largo is run by Mark Flanagan, who's a longtime friend of mine, and it was a very, very funny, interesting, and beautiful, poignant moment for me. Mark Flanagan had just gotten this club back that he had been involved in as a co-owner for a couple of years and gotten out of because the other people he was working with didn't understand that music was why people went there. So he had just reopened it, and he's a dear friend, and he said, you know, I want you to play Friday nights here. I said, you shouldn't give me that night. That's going to be your best night for people drinking and you're making money, and I want this thing to be a success. I'll open for people on like Mondays and Tuesdays. He's like, no, I'm putting it on Friday night. It's going to work. So this offer came up, and it involved me getting a record deal and getting a bunch of money to go on tour. And a few of these tour dates were sort of interrupting this little Friday thing I started doing, which felt right to me. And we were in the kitchen at the old Largo. I had only been doing a couple months of gigs. And he's like, yeah, it doesn't sound like these people care about you or actually believe in you. I said, yeah, I suspect the same thing. He said, you know, what do you need? You know, what's your rent? And it was $400 at the time, I think. And it was like, okay, well, what if I give you $200 a week? I'm like, but you might not make that with people at the door. So I argued with him. But I'll never forget, I was sitting on the steps that were in the kitchen at the old Largo, and I just thought about it for a second. Like, just deep thought, very quickly, intuitional thing. It's like, oh, you're willing to take a risk for me, and you believe in me, and my rent will be played, and I'll get to play whatever music I want. And I just looked up at him and said, okay, you have a deal. The amount of stories I got back that we got through various people, from all of these business people, went, he's crazy. He just started on a record deal. He was going to get this amount of money for to play a 100-person club. Like, and we actually just used to laugh about it at the time, even when, you know, my gig hadn't taken off locally.
Right.
Which, again, is an absurd thing. You're supposed to go for the brass ring. I should be touring. I should be doing this and that. Why have I stayed here in town? Well, okay, I can work on a record one day, something for a movie the next, play piano all day the next, daydream the day after that, and play a gig with no set list the day after that. I used to go see Les Paul in New York, and he had discovered after his years of fame that his favorite thing was playing to a small but attentive audience, and he found a weekly gig in New York doing that. He did it for the last 30 years of his life. And I was a regular attendee, and you never knew what you were going to get. Suddenly I found myself doing the same thing. Suddenly people were showing up, and everything felt right. And within weeks of this conversation, suddenly it was sold out. There were all sorts of different people coming through. Other artists were coming through, and next thing I know, all these people who had to do the self-promotional things, which I've just chosen not to, were coming to me going, wait a minute, you've got it figured out. You just do the fun part.
What way you felt, then you start concentrating on that. You know, then it totally turns into that.
Well, I can also just, speaking for myself in this situation, I already really, as you know, really dug this song. So, you know, heard it once through, it sounded lovely, didn't seem like it needed a lot. So I was playing, desperately not wanting to step on anything. I was still trying to fool around a little bit just to find what the place would be in it. But it was absolutely, don't do it. And then after that, it's like, oh, I guess I'm not having enough of a conscious part. And so you get the more self-centered thing of, like, well, I should make the part good, right? That stuff. Whereas that wasn't there at all. It was just like this occasional little game of whoopsie, like, oh, I hurt myself too much there, that's bad. And it's a hell of a lot nicer to listen to.
I think, you know, when you're a master, that what you do the first time will be right. I just believe that.
Right.
And you can, you know, because you have such a active mind, you know, I have a lot of other ideas I would really, really get. But the odds are
Here are the
first
30
thing
things I might do, right?
but I think the first thing you play, often you'll come back and go, yeah, that's probably a really pretty good idea, and I did it 2 hours ago. So,
Yeah.
so let's go to the next song now.
Yeah. And it's good, and I think it's also good.
I mean, don't you feel like
I am
like that.
confident because I know if all you used was the first take and you just muted the bits where in the beginning I like hit some dumb loud note and realized, oh, I have to play really quiet.
Yeah.
You muted that. If you just did that, warts and all, I
I
would have been okay.
Yeah.
I like the little bridge thing we overdubbed. I think you got a selection of nice and